While Xbox has done some questionable things this year, I'm still a huge advocate of Game Pass. Game Pass is a fantastic service that you don't even need an actual Xbox console to play. And my favorite thing about Game Pass is actually the plethora of indie games that you can essentially play for free. And this service remains unmatched with readily and easily available indie games you can play. And before I get to listing these wonderful games, how about hitting that subscribe button? It really helps small creators, and consider dropping a like and comment. Let's get some of the heavy hitter indies out the way. Most people who enjoy indies or even the mainstream public probably has played or heard some of these games. But if you're new to gaming or indies, definitely check out these indie classics that are available. Hollow Knight and Celeste. Hollow Knight and Celeste are arguably the most popular indies to have emerged in the last 10 years, Hollow Knight being a Metroidvania platformer with some of the smoothest movement and combat of any game out there, with a beautiful art style and aesthetic, and Celeste being a platformer with very difficult obstacles to overcome, with amazing 8-bit graphics and a surprisingly deep story. We have Overcooked 2, which is one of the most popular co-op indies to have ever come out, especially among couples. This is a go-to game for partners, and trust me, it always ends in a fight. Slay the Spire is one of my all-time favorite indies and quite possibly one of the greatest card-based games to ever come out. With the roguelite element and strategic deck building, the game has almost infinite replayability. Stardew Valley could actually be probably the most popular indie game to emerge in the last 10 years. It is peak mastery of the farming sim genre, and it is unmatched in that category. But if you're not a fan of the 8-bit style of Stardew, My Time at Portia is on Game Pass as well, and it is a decent alternative, but it's still not as good as Stardew Valley. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is another popular title, seeing as it has the Ninja Turtle name slapped on it. This classic arcade beat-em-up style game is a must-play for fans of retro games. Continuing with some more of the popular indies out there, Goat Simulator games are here, and while it's one of the dumbest games you'll ever play, it's also one of the most mindlessly fun games you'll enjoy. No Man's Sky is a game that has redeemed itself in the last 5 or so years after a mediocre status that it was released in. They've done a lot of work to bring this game up to a playable and enjoyable state, and it's a game you can sink countless hours into. Dead Cells is a popular Metroidvania style game with a cool atmosphere and even cooler combat. It's one of the cheaper games to pick up outside of Game Pass, but it's essentially free here, so no need for that. Limbo and Inside. I'm putting these together because they're basically sister games. They have similar playstyle and aesthetic, seeing as they were created by the same team, but the games are so worth picking up. The mildly complicated but engaging puzzles to the eerie vibe, these games are both worth the playthrough. Among Us is Among Us, everybody knows this game. Even if you're the most casualist of all casual players, but it's on here. Palworld was a day one release for Game Pass. It's that cool open world Pokemon-esque game where you can attack the mons yourself and you can even capture the bad guys. It's a survival open world crafting RPG that is addicting, but in my personal opinion, it gets a little repetitive, but for those of you who like games like these, this one is a must play. Brotato is a cool shooter game with a top view. It's meant to be this silly, fun game that doesn't take itself too serious, but it's very entertaining and a chaotic, fun time. Similar to Brotato, Vampire Survivors is a chaotic, lovely mess with some of the lowest quality visuals, but one of the most fun games I've ever played, and a game I consider to be in my top 3 favorite indies of all time. Tunic is one of the most visually unique games on here and also one of the most fun, which I seem to have already said a lot. It takes a lot of inspiration from Zelda, and the isometric-ish element to it makes it stand out. Moonlighter is an awesome 2-in-1 type of game. You dungeon crawl and combat your way through the wild, and then you run a shop in town, and the duality of the two, quote-unquote occupations makes for an engaging and fun time. Lies of P is listed as an indie, which at release I didn't even know it was. But this game is an incredibly well fleshed out game that looks and feels like a big budget AAA game. It's a dark, magical take on the Pinocchio story, and definitely worth checking out. Sea of Stars was poised as one of the next best JRPGs to emerge out of the indie scene, and while I haven't personally played it, I've heard great things and it looks like it'll be a great experience. Octopath Travelers 1 and 2 are also here, and the series is deeply beloved. Another one that I haven't played, but the reviews speak for themselves, plus the visuals are stunning, and you get to play as 8 different characters. Scorn, like Lies of P, is another game that almost looks AAA. The visuals are very well made and designed. It's a creepy first-person horror game with like a lot of gore. If you're queasy to this type of stuff, I probably wouldn't recommend it, but either way, it's pretty cool. And on the lighter side, we have some Slime Rancher 2, not a game that I'm too familiar with other than the trailers I've seen, but it honestly looks fun enough to kill some time with, and it has a very colorful and whimsical setting. A Short Hike is another game that looks quite whimsical, with a very chill and relaxing game style and visuals. I've heard great things about this one, and I'd guarantee that people who are more into the cozy style of gaming will adore A Short Hike. Played Up is another game similar to Overcooked. It's got its differences. If you were to choose between two fast-paced cooking style games, I'm sure that most people will say Overcooked. However, Played Up does have its supporters that would tell you otherwise. Unpacking is another game that seems to have a cult following. It's a super relaxing organization cozy game. I've played about 2 hours of this, and while it's not necessarily for me, I can definitely see the appeal and why the cozy gamers have adopted this as a must play. Firewatch on the surface looks like a cozy-ish game because of its warm setting and slower paced gameplay, but it's a first-person view mystery game with some adult themes that may not be suitable for a younger audience, but it's an engaging story and easy to play through. Cassette Beast is an RPG that, while the concept itself isn't entirely unique, the reskin of having the theme of cassettes makes it an intriguing on its own, and while I never finished the game, the handful of hours I spent was enjoyable, and I'm not opposed to circling back to finishing it. Indivisible is a cool action RPG platformer that has an awesome hand-drawn art and a fun combat system that captivates you enough to keep on playing, and while I don't think it's a very popular title, I definitely think it's worth trying out. And I'm assuming you like cute animals because, who doesn't? Party Animals is an online multiplayer game that feels a little clunky at times, but that's on purpose, and once you get used to the physics of the game, it can be a lot of fun, and the adorable animals help digest this a lot better as well. Also, Little Kitty Big City is a fun open world game where you can play as an adorable cat. You do quests and roaming around, doing cat stuff and wearing adorable hats. Pigeons aren't usually cute, but in this fun little rhythm game, they're not too bad. A Little to the Left is similar to Unpacking. It's an organization type game, but once in a while a cat will just mess up your progress and gives it that extra little sense of urgency to complete. Haunty is a newer game that I've been wanting to check out myself. I love the dark aesthetic with a handcrafted art style that I'm a big fan of. The possession aspect to solve puzzles and defeat enemies seems like a really fun playstyle. And of course, I have to mention my personal all-time favorite indie game, Dicey Dungeons, a game that I have the highest of praises for, but a game that isn't going to be a lot of people's cup of tea. However, while you're already in Game Pass, you might as well take a peek, right? There are dozens of other indie games that I didn't mention that I'm sure some of you would love, so give it a browse. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.